Okay, sorry about that. So let's get our people here. We're going to get everybody back. Hopefully you guys all followed us over. We had started the live on the wrong channel, but we should be here now. And let me just get everybody in, and we're going to just start over. Like there was nothing happened. We're just late. Nothing went wrong.
No, we
Everything
were
was fine. Here we
fine.
go. My bad. My bad. It's like I was just born.
Love
I
it.
think I think it's only my third time doing this. I think Adrienne's coming on. She's looping around. There
Yeah.
she is. Sorry, Adrienne. It was my bad. I was on the wrong channel. Nice to see you. We're just going to start over like there was nothing
Yeah.
like nothing had happened. So, welcome to Not Your Mother's Menopause Instagram Live, all about menopause and osteoporosis. Super thrilled to have our guests tonight. I'm just going to do a little introduction. So we have Dr. Jennifer Hahn, a dual residency trained, board certified clinical pharmacist. And she's the co-founder and co-CEO of Scene Nutrition, a food tech startup focused on bone health for women. After a diagnosis of osteoporosis in 2020, she is now on a mission to revolutionize the calcium supplement industry by using only real food calcium to improve bone health. And
Mhm.
we have Adrienne Bitar, who's a lecturer in food studies at Cornell University and the author of Diet and the Disease of Civilization. She's also the co-founder and co-CEO of Scene Nutrition, and she is committed to bone health education and believes deeply in the food first approach to nutrition and health. So glad to have you guys both here.
Thanks for
Thank you so much.
having us.
Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you. This is a real pleasure. I'm so glad we get to chat.
I know. After knowing, as we said on the practice version of this live, we were first introduced to your amazing product and your story um, when we hooked up about the event we hosted in last January, and I think you definitely have converts in the three of us because both me and Stacy and April all use the product, so highly endorsed. So you guys should all know that we are, and the people in the audience should know that we are actually customers of nobody's paid us to do
Yeah.
this.
Nope.
Yeah.
We believe in the product, and um, we like the product.
Thank you so much. That means so much. Like when we have natural, authentic support in our product from trusted providers like yourself, and I know Stacy, I think she was on here, but I don't see her anymore.
She's still
But like that,
here.
oh, okay. That means a lot for us.
Yeah, that's great. Do you want to tell us, Jen, I guess your story? Because, I'm looking at you and seeing that 5 years ago you were diagnosed with osteoporosis, and I'm doing some math. So,
Yeah, I mean, so I in the intro we said I was diagnosed with osteoporosis in 2020. I was 29 years old. I was 2 months postpartum. I just had my first daughter. I only have one daughter. Um, it was COVID. I was like dealing with all of that. Like I didn't have support because my parents weren't able to come and help me during that period. It was a stressful time, but just I rolled off a yoga ball and started to have really bad back pain. It's like I couldn't even take like deep inhales because it would cause a lot of pain. So then I asked my doctor about it. I got imaging, thankfully, right away, and they found multiple vertebral fractures in my spine. And so that led to a whole bunch of tests and specialist referrals to see what was going on because I was an otherwise healthy 29-year-old, but I shouldn't have broken my back from falling off a yoga ball.
yeah.
And so eventually I was diagnosed with pregnancy lactation osteoporosis,
Right.
which is a very, very rare condition, but it does happen because the thought is that I didn't reach peak bone mass density. And so when I was in this vulnerable state, breastfeeding, not eating a lot of nutrition, it just made my bones even weaker. And so even like a small fall like that, they call it a fragility fracture, caused me to break my back.
That's before I met you and heard your story, I didn't even Stacey, you're shaking your head like you know
I've
what
seen two
you've
patients with
Oh
it.
my
really.
God.
And
Yeah.
it's postpartum induced osteopenia or osteoporosis. They actually find it a lot in the sacrum.
Mhm.
I've seen it where patients are coming in with severe back pain postpartum. Usually they're postpartum or pregnant, and they have to get their x-rays obviously after they give birth. So sometimes you can walk off a step and
Yeah.
fracture, and then they find these multiple fractures. And
Mhm.
yes, it has to do with, it's rare, but I've seen two patients in my career that had this.
Yeah.
And yeah, and again, it's probably there's a genetic predisposition to it, or it's so interesting.
Mhm.
I mean, that must have been like so confusing and so terrifying because what 29-year-old is even thinking about that?
Right.
Not me. I mean, like I'm in the health field. I've been working with patients in the primary care setting. I was working with diabetic patients all the time. I see women over 70 all the time and see their DEXA scans, but I wasn't thinking about it for myself. I wasn't
Right.
even thinking about my own bone health after I had my baby. So it was just like a really eye-opening experience. Wow, more women need to know about this and need to know what's going on in their bodies during these vulnerable periods like
Right.
pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause, so that we're prepared.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Do you guys want to talk a little bit about just for some people who might not know as much as we do about the effects that especially for this group, that perimenopause and menopause and the shifts in estrogen in our bodies can have on our bones? Like what's the natural, what happens as we age, and then what happens as we start to lose our estrogen?
Mhm.
Um, I'll So I always think about it in terms of a graph, although it's kind of sad to think about the other side of the peak. But for most people, they'll reach peak bone mass, so the time in their lives when their bones have the greatest strength, around age 30, give or take. And then after that, it's a sort of a gradual decline in bone mass until you reach these pivotal moments like menopause, where you lose the bone protecting effects of estrogen. And then for many women in the 5 to 7 years following menopause, they can lose about 20%
Wow.
of their bones. So it's a pretty dramatic decline. And then that's sort of a pivotal moment, and then the slope sort of evens out. That's why we're really attentive to speaking to women at these life stages where it's really critical to ensure that you're taking care of your bones, exercise, getting your DEXAs, eating your calcium, like thinking about your bones not just as a skeleton that you're born with as a child and that grows bigger as you age and then is stable throughout your adulthood and older years, but rather something that's constantly being remodeled, constantly needing caretaking, constantly needing attention. So I think that's really been our mission, is to redirect the attention to bone as like a living, breathing part of our body that needs care.
Mhm.
Right. And go ahead, Stace.
Well, and it's also interesting too, and I know Allison, you and I both know this, is that when you go to your primary care doctor or your GYN, they're telling you don't have a DEXA scan until you're 65, right? Like that's just the standard of care. What's now coming out is yes, like I demanded one. Like
Right.
I
Mhm.
found, and of course it showed mild. I mean, when they use the graph when the DEXA comes out, it says if I were to rate you right now, you have, a 15% chance of breaking a hip at or after a certain amount. But it's still eye opening, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know this. When they do the DEXA, I feel like they only did one hip or like one side of certain
Mhm.
joints. And that gives them kind of an understanding of
Yeah.
like what it is going to look like.
Yeah.
But we should be demanding that at 50. There's no reason that a 50-year-old woman going through perimenopause shouldn't have a baseline right then and there. And the cost is actually, I mean, my insurance, I had to pay out of pocket, and it's about $100. Like it's like $100 test.
Mhm.
So super important.
Yeah. I agree with you. We both agree with you is that DEXAs should be done much sooner than 65.
Yeah,
Definitely at 50, maybe even younger.
right.
Like the guidelines have been updated recently where if you have one risk factor for low bone density, so that means do you have a history of being on medications that would predispose you to more porous bones, like steroids or thyroid medications or PPIs for a long time? If you have a history of osteoporosis in your family, history of an eating disorder or restrictive eating for sports or whatever it may be, you can get a DEXA scan covered,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you should do it younger. And just to your point, the DEXA scan is really helpful because it gives you a baseline of where you're at in terms of your bone density, but it's definitely not everything because it's just a snapshot of what your bones are like in your spine and then in your hip. But we know that your bone density can be different in your wrist or your ankle. So like when I go to my endocrinology appointments at Columbia, they look at my wrist and my ankle as well as my spine and my hip to give more of a picture of where my bones are at throughout my body.
So can you talk a little bit more about that? About because my like just to talk about my experience as well, because Stace, it was the same thing. Like I went in, I'm 54 years old. I went to my doctor and I said, I'd like to get a DEXA scan.
Yeah.
And she said, she said, do you have family history? And I said, yes, because my mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis. I can't remember when. And um, so I went to and I really didn't know. I was just like, oh, I'm just going to go get a DEXA scan and everything's going to be fine. I'm like, I'm a personal trainer and I take care of myself and I lift weights like every day for a living, so I figured
Yeah.
everything would be fine. And I was shocked because I had a diagnosis of osteoporosis
Uh,
from it. And I was like, this has to be wrong. Something's broken in the machine. And, and I said, but, and the doctor said to me, my doctor who I love, and she's a great doctor, she's like, well, take your calcium and you, your vitamin D and do weight bearing exercise and we'll check you again in a year. She wasn't concerned because she needed that. She wanted that as a baseline and
mhm.
she knows what I do. But I was like, you remember what I do for a living? She's like, it's genetic. Like that's basically what she used to go. She's like, it's genetic.
Mm.
So it was like really, to hear that. I mean, at 29, I can't imagine hearing that at 29, but like to hear it at my age and like I was like, why is nobody talking about this?
Yeah.
And yes, my insurance did wind up covering it. Um, but they do only look at the spine and the femur, like the femoral neck, right? Like right where, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Most do. Sorry. It's 7:30 and my daughter just got home from the park. So if you hear like knocking, that's her.
That's okay.
Okay.
They want to talk because mine's like crying downstairs about something going in the shower. So,
Well,
and I'm
lock the
like,
door or
please don't
so.
come in.
Well, let's talk about how like what calcium is, what it why we need it, how we get it in our bodies, how much we need as women, how that all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about that and then maybe talk about how it's different from food and the importance of having food sources versus supplemental calcium.
Yeah. Yes, that's like the meat of it. I like to describe osteoporosis. Like if you actually look at the word, osteo means bone, right? And porosis means porous, so it means porous bones. And it's defined as a disease if you're not making enough, or if you're losing too much, or if it's a combination of both. And if that happens, then you are at higher risk for fracturing. And so if we actually look at your bone, right, there's like the trabecular component, the cortical component. Bone needs calcium in order to build. So the little cells that build bone are the osteoblasts. They need calcium as its like building block to build the structure of bone. So if we're not consuming enough, so if you're 49 years old and younger, then the recommended amount to consume is 1,000 milligrams a day. And if you're 50 years and older, then the recommended amount is 1,200 milligrams a day. So if you're not consuming the recommended amount per day, whether that be through food or supplements or whatever, then you can kind of think of it as like you're not giving your bones the building blocks to build.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have something to add, Adrian?
Oh no, I'm just so much in agreement. And it's, if you think about, one thing that I like to try to do is visualize, because I teach and I always try to communicate what this actually means in material language. So for the average weight American woman, it's like 145 pounds or so. The amount of calcium in your body is 2.6 pounds of calcium.
Mm.
Wow.
2.6 pounds. It's a massive
Yeah.
amount. We think of these little trace minerals, like this is why they're horse pills when you take them in a capsule. It's
Mm-hmm.
a bulky ingredient. Like 1,200 milligrams or 1.2 grams, that's a substantial amount of like mineral composition.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about 99% of that 2.6 pounds is stored in your bones and in your teeth.
Huh.
So if you're losing that calcium, I mean, it comes from somewhere. That's why one of the warning signs of osteoporosis is weight loss, because that
Oh,
it's
that
not just
yeah.
you're losing fat, you're losing muscle, you're actually losing
Losing
bone.
bone.
Bone. That's why
Yes,
you get shorter, right?
yes,
Like, because you shrink.
height loss, weight loss, like your body's actually losing parts of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think about that because 2.6 pounds, that's
Yeah.
substantial. Calcium is absolutely critical, not just for bone health, but for other parts too. But if you don't have that calcium to begin with, I mean, it's going to come from somewhere. And that's why some people refer to your bones as like a storage system, a pantry, a reservoir, a bank account, or whatever metaphor you want to use, because your body needs it, right? So if you're lactating or if you're just normal daily operations, it's going to pull it from the bone. And that's where you get the porosity of the bone and the heightened risk of fracture.
What does 1,200 grams, 1,200 milligrams of calcium in food look like?
Mm.
Good question. It's a lot. Like, so there's this really good resource um, at the International Osteoporosis Foundation. If you Google calcium calculator, you can input like what you ate in the last week. So they want to know what you ate in the last 7 days to look at, on average, how much calcium you're consuming per day. And it's surprising because you have to eat a lot. So, for example, drinking 1 glass of milk, 1 8-ounce glass of milk, that's about 300 milligrams of dietary calcium.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. So does anybody get 12? Do people get, like, what do you guys, in your research, like, what
yeah,
have you found about how much, do people get 1,200? No.
It's really tough. The average, they've done population-wide, it's like dietary studies. So they found that the average American woman, and pretty much in all of our discussions we only talk about women. We could talk about men too if you'd like. But the average American woman gets 850 milligrams of calcium. And that includes both fortified sources, supplements, and food.
mhm,
So between all three of those sources combined, you're still falling
Yeah.
short, like 200, 300, 400 milligrams every single day. That's going to exact a toll on your bone quality.
Right.
That's going to exact a toll to hasten up the decline
mhm.
of your bone density over age. So they found, they've done cross international studies. So they, for example, in the UK, they mandate the fortification of wheat, and they found that actually forms like a not insignificant part of the British consumption of calcium. The United States, we don't mandate fortification with calcium, but even from those three sources combined, women are still falling like significantly short day by day, year by year, and that's where we get that loss in bone density.
And it's not like we're living it personally, right? Because I had osteoporosis and I was like, oh crap, I'm not eating enough calcium. That's the first thing that my endocrinologist said. They're like, they did a whole calcium diet history with me, and I'm lactose intolerant. I don't really enjoy a lot of dairy, and so I was definitely not hitting my mark. But that's the source of where SEEN came about, because we're like, we're not eating enough calcium. I don't want to take the synthetic calcium pills that are available on the market. How do we make something that's from food and actually enjoyable to eat? Because we know bone health is a lifelong commitment. If I'm going to be doing this for the next 50, 60 years, however long, I want to enjoy how I'm going to eat my calcium.
Yeah. They
Yeah.
are yummy. We have a question. I'm going to ask you this question from C. Roxanne B, who has asked, do you have to take calcium every day? Some days I forget. Also, is it possible to take too much? Which I think is a great question.
Yeah, so I think I guess it depends on if you're talking about do you have to take calcium every day? Is that a supplement or is that from food? Because whether that's from supplements or food, you should be eating enough calcium every day to hit those recommended targets that we talked about, like 1,000 milligrams or 1,200 milligrams. If you're not eating enough in your normal diet, that's when you look for supplementation or you look for our real food calcium chews to fill that gap to get you where you need to be. And it's definitely possible to take too much. Um, I always like to say this as a pharmacist, the dose makes the poison. So anything in excess can be bad. And calcium is not a water-soluble vitamin that you can just pee out like vitamin B and stuff. It can hang out where you don't want it to be. And so you want to stay within those recommended amounts of 1,000 or 1,200.
Yeah. I was talking to a retailer today. I just stopped to a grocery store, a health food store that was interested in carrying our chews. And she's like, oh, we'll put it in the snack aisle because you run nutrition facts. You're a fortified food. I'm like, yes, but like this is not something you want to like snack on because it really does provide 500 milligrams per 10-gram chew, which is like this big.
Yeah,
So they say the tolerable upper limit is like 2,500 milligrams. So I really wouldn't, I mean, I wouldn't encourage anyone to eat more than they need in a day. And
Even though they
also,
are
they are
delicious.
delicious. They're like, they
The
could be
first
snacks. They're really good.
well, the first ingredient is organic
Yes.
yes,
nuts, right? Like
I mean,
it's
that's the best.
delicious.
Yeah.
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 So I had to be a little stern with her. I was like, not the snack food aisle at all. Um, and then our body best absorbs that's the reason why we chose 500 milligrams is both it's like it's the recommended dose, but then our body best absorbs calcium at the peak absorption rate peaks out at 500 milligrams and it starts to decline after that. So that's why we very carefully chose 500 milligrams, but definitely not a snack.
Not a snack,
Nope,
but it
not
would
a
be
snack.
one a day, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's, yeah. So it's the
That's
one
what
a
we
day.
say. Yeah, because of that population health data that we were just talking about. Like, if the
Right.
average woman is eating 800, then yeah, one a day is going to exactly fill that gap and get you to where you need to be. But we get that question all the time is, can I have two a day? Especially like if I'm traveling. And yes, you can. And that's what I do, especially when I'm busy or traveling. But we just say separate it by at least 3 hours so you're maximizing your
Okay.
absorption.
Okay. There's a couple other questions. A question, I think, based on what we were talking about before about the food sources. What foods are the best sources of calcium? I don't know if you guys can see these, but here's one.
Mhm.
What foods are the best sources of calcium? That's from Julie.
We for a whole host of like very interesting political and historical reasons, dairy is extremely well studied. So dairy has been sort of like a foundation of nutrition science. Like I'm speaking from the Cornell campus right here. So I mean, milk has been
A lot of
studied.
cows.
Yes,
Yep.
ins
You
and outs.
really
So we
know your food sources at Cornell.
yes, we do. And actually, we source our milk protein is actually from a local dairy cooperative here in upstate New York. It's a beautiful place.
That's cool.
My,
Yeah.
Very
my
Um,
cool.
best friend, by the way, is on this right now. I text her.
oh,
So all three girls went to Cornell,
oh
and her husband works at
Oh,
wow.
Cornell, and she lives in Trumansburg. So hi,
Oh
Chris.
no
I know you're
way.
on here.
Oh my gosh. We should link up. Yeah, we try to host events. Like we hosted factor screening here on campus. And
Amazing.
Right.
yeah. So yeah, we know that dairy is like what has one of the highest rates of bioavailability from any form of calcium because it has the mineral complex that aids the absorptions, like the magnesium, the phosphorus, the zinc, the copper, the iron. So we feel very confident using a dairy source, and it's challenging for vegans or people with dairy allergies. I see that's another
Yeah.
question to get sufficient calcium in their diet without relying either on fortified foods or synthetic supplements. But we chose the best source, which we believe is cow's milk dairy.
So if I want to make sure that my diet, that what I'm eating on my plate is as rich in calcium as I can be, what kinds of things other than milk and yogurt and cheese, are there other foods that are high in calcium?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're one food that we've been having a lot of conversations lately about this, and so it's on top of my mind. Chia seeds are a great
Oh
source, and
yeah.
then there's this other seed that it's called basil seeds, and it's also very high in calcium. So that's a great like non-dairy source of calcium. You do have to consume, enough of it in order to get the amounts that you need, but it's kind of similar to chia seeds. Like you can let it sit overnight in some like milk, not milk, like yogurt or
Yeah.
whatever, and then they kind of like bloat up and you just yeah.
Okay.
There's different sources, like people, I'm not endorsing this, but some people say will boil eggshells and pulverize them, and that's actually a very rich source of calcium.
Wait, and do
Then
what with them?
sardines. Freeze them.
And then like sprinkle them like a little powder?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've tried it. We tried everything. When we did
I'm
our
sure.
research for this, we tried everything. So we know all the, we were deep in the Reddit forums and like thinking about alternative sources of calcium. And then sardines are actually a really good
Hmm.
source of
Oh,
calcium.
right, right.
With the
Because you can eat the
bones.
bones.
Yeah.
People used to eat bone meal, but it's actually very dangerous because there's a lot of heavy metals. But there's different sources. Um, Sardines, chia seeds, basil
I
seeds,
do.
vegetables, spinach, other
Okay.
Yeah,
sources.
Hmm.
spinach. I'm
Spinach.
trying to get the bag open, my new bag open, so I can show people. Let me see.
Oh, I have one
Come on, Stace. Open the bag.
Bag open. It's so bad though, because you really do want to eat them as a snack because they're so good.
Yeah.
But this is kind of what they look like.
Yeah.
And they're delicious. They're like it's my morning little part. And actually,
Oh
I
yeah.
have a tablespoon of chia seeds every
Oh,
morning
perfect.
in some apple cider vinegar. That's my elixir in the morning. So I'm like,
Ooh.
I'm good now. Like I feel like I now have my calcium down.
Yay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I want to just talk about, let's talk a little bit about the relationship between menopause and osteoporosis. We started to talk about it a little bit more, but I wonder if we can kind of circle back to that because I think a lot of the people that we know who are on are looking for that kind of information. So, like, I'm your menopausal woman. I've got osteoporosis.
Hmm.
Is it reversible? What can, like, I take my supplements, I do all the things. What else can I do? And what's happening? What's
What's
happening to
happening?
me?
I know. Well, it's when we hit menopause, I don't know if we drew this exact link, is that our estrogen we hit a rapid decline in estrogen. And like Adrian said, it's like pulling off the brakes from the cells that are breaking down bone. So now there's like no regulation. And so we have faster bone loss than bone gain. And that's what's happening in menopause, and that's why the first 5 to 7 years after you hit menopause, we see that rapid decline in bone density up to 20% because of this reason. So for bone health is like any other chronic disease that it requires a whole interdisciplinary, holistic approach. So we need to focus on nutrition. Yes, we need adequate calcium from food that's preferred. You need adequate vitamin D and the helper minerals that are going to help calcium get to where it needs to be. Strength training. This is your expertise, Allison. Of course, bones respond to stress. And so when we cause stress on our bones by like jumping or lifting heavy weights, that stimulates the osteoblasts to build more bone.
Right.
So you need those things in concert with like maybe medications is an option like that may be an option for you depending on the degree of your osteoporosis that you have, right? And we know that replenishing estrogen in the form of hormone therapy
Yeah.
is bone protective. So we think of it as this like whole multidisciplinary approach that you need to implement for bone health, but probably for your health in general. And it needs to continue because just because you have improvement in your bone density doesn't mean that your osteoporosis is cured and you don't have it anymore. And so we kind of stray away from saying osteoporosis is reversible, but focus more that osteoporosis can be improved or your bone density can improve. And then you need to work to keep it where it's at.
Right. So you can build back bone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like for me, I was, I had full-blown osteoporosis. I had spinal fractures at 29. I did all those things that I just talked about. I increased my calcium, my vitamin D. I started strength training for the first time in my life. I go 2 times a week now. And I also had estrogen on board. And my latest DEXA scan, this was back in October, my bone density in my spine is now in the normal range. So
Oh,
yes,
that's
my
really
bone
good to
density
know.
has
Okay.
improved. Yeah.
That's good. That's great.
Do
That's great to know.
all the things though.
Do all the
Yeah.
things. Do all the things, and I still have Swiss cheese bones. I don't know what it's like. When they show the picture, you go in for your DEXA scan, and they're like, okay, so these are they have the healthy bone, and then they have a bone that has a few black spots, and then they have like a picture of a bone that's like it's like a crunch bar,
I
like there's
know.
just air in it, and they're like, this is where you are. I was like, are you kidding? It was like,
I
So
know. It's frightening.
I think this is going to change the trajectory because now we are doing more. I think of like not your mother's menopause. Like my mother is like they were just put on a medication. They never did the holistic form of weight training and nutrition and estrogen.
Mhm.
Like, we might be changing us going forward
oh,
to where we are not going to be the osteoporotic 79-year-old, right? Like we can do this.
Yeah.
I watched Dr. Vonda Wright. I really love her. And she's really put on a couple of like tear jerkers these days
Yeah.
in her Instagram posts of what it looks like to fracture your hip at
Mhm.
uh,
well, the
80 years
morbidity
old.
rates of hip fracture, there's something like women over 60 years old who fracture a hip, like a huge percent, 20% of them will be dead in a year.
Mhm.
It's like, it's
Yeah,
just a horrible statistic.
in
Yeah.
And it's
physical
not from the hip
therapy.
fracture, it's because it's from all this other stuff that can happen after, from lack of
Absolutely.
mobility and everything like
Absolutely.
that. Yeah.
Like from a physical therapy perspective, we know like once you see a geriatric that breaks their hip, it's really hard to recover from that. And
Yeah.
so our hope is that because this is such a big question all the time is like, what do we do
Mhm.
to keep our bones healthy? And now I
Mhm.
think there's evidence of even increasing estrogen and testosterone for
Mhm.
bone health as well.
Mhm.
So it's all interesting how it's all gonna change how we age is basically, a
Yeah.
positive.
We are going to change how we age because we're having these conversations earlier. And I feel like it knowing these statistics brings it closer to home because the really scary one is like 1 in 2 women over the age of 50 will have an osteoporotic fracture. Like that makes it really personal because I already had one and I don't want one again. So, and I don't want anyone else to have one. And so that's why we're bringing up these conversations and talking about things like calcium, which it's not a very sexy or hot topic, but it's super important. And so that's why we're bringing it up.
Okay. Um, yeah, I mean, one of the things too, there's a little bit of confusion about just heading back to the building back bones and like what is the difference between making bones stronger or building bones, and is there a clarification of that, because there seems to be some discrepancy between what some people are being told from their endocrinologists about, no, at a certain, when you're younger, yes, you can regenerate your bone or you can build back bone, but when you're older you can strengthen your bone. Is there a difference between building bone and strengthening bones? Or is that
Yeah,
just choice of words?
there is a difference because if we're looking at the actual structure of bone again, you have like the inner part and then the outer part. And kind of like what I was talking about before, if we look at your microarchitecture of your bone, it can be different if you're looking at the inner part or your outer part. And that can kind of translate to, are we looking at density or are we looking at strength?
Okay.
And and this is also where muscle really comes into play because you need muscle in order to build bone strength as well, right? We already know that they crosstalk to each other. And so if you're losing a lot of muscle and bone, then you will have low bone density and low bone strength. But if you have increased muscle, and you're working on strength training and feeding your bones what they need to be, then you can increase both.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Very interesting. There's also a really interesting comment somebody wrote, and I don't know if you guys can see it, but one of our participants here says she was eating a lot. I'm assuming it's a she, but this person said, I was eating a lot of spinach until after being diagnosed with severe osteoporosis. And then she found out that spinach is high in oxalates and that reduces calcium's absorptions. So here's one of those things where it's like, you think you're doing the thing and everything's great. And then they're like, oh, here's a brick wall. You can run right into it. So can you talk a little bit about that? If
Yeah,
either of
yeah,
you is
yeah.
there? Yeah.
So oxalates are just naturally present in foods, and they happen to be in a lot of like plant foods like spinach. And the thought is that oxalates and calcium bind together in your intestine, thereby reducing the amount of calcium that you can absorb. There is a lot of nuance there, though, because in the studies that are looking at calcium and oxalates, it depends on which food source you're talking about, because there's a lot of other nutrients that are present that affect that calcium absorption. So there was one specific study that looked at someone actually consuming spinach and milk. These were the two foods, and they found that the oxalates present in spinach did not decrease calcium absorption. But other studies, again, these are small, looked at spinach intake and then calcium carbonate intake, which is synthetic calcium, and then the calcium carbonate absorption was affected. So it just highlights the point that we need to look at what food we're talking about that's providing the oxalates and what food or what supplement is providing the calcium. And there may not be as big of an interaction, or maybe there is or isn't, depending on the foods.
Interesting. Very cool.
Everything in moderation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Everything in moderation.
Yeah.
This was so
And Julie wrote that her doctor suggested infusions of Reclast for her mild osteoporosis. That was her osteoporosis was brought on by, like you had mentioned before, that it can be brought on by medications,
Mm-hmm.
By long-term use of steroids or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the options for osteoporosis. It's a common one because it's an infusion that you can do instead of having to like do injections. I have to do injections every day, or like consuming bisphosphonates which a lot of people don't want to do. But it's just one tool in your toolbox. And we have to, even if you're on medication, you still have to be focusing on nutrition, right? Like eating enough calcium and vitamin D and all that.
Yeah. Well, Stace, do you have any more questions?
No, this was so amazing.
I know. Do either of you two have anything that you would like to add that we didn't get a chance to touch on that you're like, I wish they would ask this question?
Hmm.
Good
Mm.
question. We could talk
Well,
about
maybe
calcium all night.
I know.
maybe we didn't really touch on like what exactly is the difference between dietary calcium and synthetic calcium. We could
Yes.
talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. That's because that's the crux of why you guys decided to make Scene the way it is, right?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Let's talk about that. So the difference between dietary calcium from food and supplemental calcium, like your calcium chew that you'll buy in a jar.
So, and I guess I'll start, and then Adrian is really good at answering this from the food perspective. And I'll give like the medicine perspective. When you're roaming the aisles of CVS or Walmart or Walgreens, when you pick up a calcium supplement, majority of what you're going to pick up is isolated synthetic calcium. That means that it's just providing calcium in silo, and it's in the synthetic form. So that's most likely calcium carbonate or calcium citrate. There's other forms now, but those are the two most common. What we know from a bone health perspective is that you need much more than calcium for bone health, right? We need the magnesium, the phosphorus, copper, iron, zinc, vitamin D, vitamin K, you need protein, you need collagen, all of this for bone health. And so that's why it's recommended to consume your calcium from food. And do you want to take away the food part, Adrienne?
Oh, sure. I mean, I was loving how you were describing it, but one misconception is like sometimes people think that we're just adding a little bit of this and adding a little bit of that, and it's like this stone soup of a calcium chew. And I think what is really innovative about our product, and we do have a patent too, is we're just taking the mineral composition out of milk and we're not changing it at all. So
Mm-hmm.
just the mineral balance that we know has been studied since the 19th century from cow's milk, we're taking that wholesale out of milk, taking the water out, taking the fat out, taking nearly all the lactose out, and keeping that intact, and then transferring it to a more convenient format. So nutritionally equivalent from a mineral standpoint to milk. Like drink milk, eat or chew, drink milk, eat or chew. The same. That is really I think a very humble approach. Not to brag about our humility, but it's a more humble approach, because why are we tinkering with the
Something.
nutrient profile of a food that we know is healthful? We're not going to tinker with it. Sure, we might add, dates for sweetness, vitamin D because we know that helps with absorption, protein because we know that helps with absorption, but we're not fiddling with it. So I think that's a really special part, that it's the calcium from food, from milk, that's
Mm-hmm.
just transferred to a more convenient format, because we are 100% confident that that is a healthful form, a healthful composition of calcium that just happens to mimic the composition of human bone.
Interesting. It's amazing that you found that out. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
it's like,
we're really proud of that.
yeah, I mean, it's very cool what you guys have done. It's very cool. Two sort of admin questions. One I can answer, and one is, this has come up a couple of times, and it came up tonight, and it's come up to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
Can people who have sensitivities or allergies to dairy products take Scene?
The two-part question. If you have a dairy allergy, then you should not be consuming our chew, because we use milk minerals and milk
Yeah.
protein. If you have a different reason where maybe you're just avoiding dairy because it's causing bloating or something like that, we have people that do consume our chews and have no problem with it just because of the amount. Our chews do have casein, so if people are kind of sensitive to casein, that could be something that would cause you to think twice. But even that, like the amount of casein in one chew is so small that it probably won't cause any issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the question, where is Scene sold? I know that you can get it on the website, which is scenenutrition.com. And it's a great website, easy to get your subscription on that website. And I know that you guys have told us that there are lots of fascinating calcium facts on the website as well. So I'll have to look through more on that. But yeah. And
Yeah.
is it sold in stores? I guess you just said that you're going to be in stores too.
Oh, we were just working
Oh,
with a local
okay.
health food store here, but we are in a few pharmacies, community pharmacies. We like to distribute there, but mainly on our
Great.
website.
Mhm.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent. I don't think we have any other I don't think there's any other
Well,
questions. And I think
well,
we've covered a lot of ground.
yes, and we're so looking forward to supporting your amazing events
Yeah.
and programming. And we hope we can get our chews into all of your goodie bags. I know they're incredible, and I know that people love your events. So just hope we can join in person
We
and
will definitely have
support
that
you in any way we
conversation for
can.
sure. We've got a lot of ideas for you guys.
Ooh.
And I have to say, having been to two Cornell graduations in agriculture, like, I've learned my best friend's daughter is in farming, and I've learned so much from being at
Yeah.
Cornell and just been this amazing. I mean, you're so inspiring. So it's just,
Very,
this is incredible.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
thank
thank you
you.
I know what
so
you guys
much.
have done is amazing. Really, really
Thank
amazing. Like, you've really changed the conversation and provided something that is so like I'm so grateful to have it because yay, they're yummy, and I don't forget to take them because they're yummy and they're right on my counter. And I
Oh,
love, and to support two women who are out there trying to help other women is amazing.
well, thank
So
you.
thank
Well,
I'm
you.
so glad
thank
that
you.
we got to connect with you all through these events. These events are amazing, and we want to keep the conversation going, obviously. So we're excited about your upcoming event and
Yep.
more details for that.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much. This has been such
you.
a wonderful and uplifting
Yeah.
conversation. And
Yeah.
yes.
All right. Have a great weekend. Thank you all for joining who are out there in Instagram land, and see you again soon. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Good
Bye.
night.
Bye.